Today on the table I have the Analog Heat 2 from Elektron, and I've owned this device nearly 6 months now, which I really can't believe. It feels like I've only had this a couple of weeks, and I thought I would just talk a little bit about my experience with it, and most importantly, was it worth the money that I paid for it, because these are not cheap devices, and I think that is a big talking point with them really. You're not picking one of these up for cheap. It's a big chunk of money, and therefore there's a lot of sort of interest around whether it's worth that or not. So I'm going to dive into those topics today and hopefully give you a better understanding of what it's like for someone to own this device and how much you use it, etc, all those kinds of things. I do want to make a few disclaimers before I start. Number one, I'm a lo-fi and hip-hop beat maker. I don't do dance, electro, upbeat stuff, so if you're someone that's looking to use it for that kind of music, might not be able to help that much with this review. Secondly, this isn't the latest version of this device that's available. There is a new one called the Analog Heat Plus, I think it's called, or the Plus FX, and that's the latest version of this device, which has some extra built-in effects. That is not this device. This is the Analog Heat 2. You can see here on my screen. It's an older device, but these are still quite sought after, so I thought this was still worth making the video about. And the third and final point is that I'm not actually going to be doing any audio examples in this. I've already done them on my channel. You can go and see the playlist, which I'll link to below. And basically, if I was to do all the examples of noises again, the video would end up being ridiculously long. So I'm just trying to boil it down to a few key points really in this video and talk about whether overall I feel that this was value for money. So as I said, I bought this about 5 or 6 months ago, and I paid, I think, £400 or £450 used. So it's not a cheap device because it doesn't do an awful lot. So if you're not familiar with what this actually is, this is basically a kind of mastering device where you put things into it, you add certain circuits, which you can see around here. There's a bunch of different distortion circuits, and in each one of those circuits you have all these controls, equalizers, filters, and drive, wet level, dry level, that you can tweak to your heart's content to get your beats to sound thicker, beefier, better, more distorted, those kinds of things. So that's what this device in essence does. It's like a mastering unit. And the first thing that I'd like to talk about really is the build quality. Now obviously for that amount of money you expect that the build quality is going to be decent, but I think it's really important to say that it does not disappoint on that front. This really is a very, very nicely made product. All the casing is metal. Imagine it's probably aluminium, but could be wrong. It definitely feels very premium anyway. All the buttons, they have a kind of 80s keyboard feel to them, but just nicer in some way. These ones down here, even the smaller ones, feel really nice. They've got a very, very nice sort of return on them when you press them. Hard to explain without actually touching them. But yeah, just take my word for it, they feel really nice. All the dials have got a kind of rubberized kind of feel to them. Not too sticky, but again, just enough grip for them to be very, very usable and very comfortable to use. This middle dial in particular is quite interesting because it has a lot of resistance on it. If you can see here, I'm pushing pretty hard on that, and then it kind of flicks to the next one. So it's kind of got lots of different points around for each circuit where it flicks to. There's like a point halfway between each LED where if you go past that point, it kind of automatically kind of flicks to the next one. It's hard to explain, but basically the only thing that I'm getting to there is that it feels great. It feels really nice. It's got this like nice resistance to it as you're using it, and overall in particular this dial just feels really satisfying to use. The screen is really nice as well. It's got this really sort of high contrast feel with the yellow and the black, and generally speaking very easy to read in all sorts of different lighting conditions. Really, really clear. So overall, the casing, the buttons, the dials, the screen, the inputs, they're all really, really nice and high quality, and there's no way I can fault it for that. It just really does tick the box for that. So moving on from the build quality, I kind of want to talk a little bit about what I use on this device, and again this sort of leans into the disclaimer that I mentioned at the start of the video. I'm a lo-fi beat maker and hip-hop beat maker, so I don't feel like you can really get the most out of this device because of the way that I'm using it. On top of that, I quite like to have quite a clean mix, so in some ways you might say I was a bit of an idiot for buying this in the first place, because all these circuits are distortion circuits, but oh well, here we are, and I did buy it. So yeah, to be perfectly honest, in the amp mode, I spend pretty much the majority of my time either using clean boost, saturation, or enhancement. So I'll be running a full beat through it, it'll be at the end of the chain, and I'll be using 90% of the time one of those three circuits, and out of that 90%, a lot of it will just be clean boost. So I tend to find myself in clean boost a lot of the time. I just think that adds a really nice sound to the beats, and in comparison with the equalizers and the filters, I just absolutely love that circuit. So yeah, for my type of music, for my taste in sort of wanting a nice, really sort of thick, clean mix, those three circuits are the only ones that are really that useful to me. Now, if you're someone that liked really crunching up drum loops or really crunching up your sound and making it sound all like edgy and rough, then you might have a lot more fun with this, especially with these circuits over here with sort of rough crunch, classic distortion. All these circuits, they get rougher as they go around basically, so if you're someone that likes that kind of sound, I think you would get more out of the device than maybe I have. But that being said, those three circuits that I tend to use, they just add such a nice feel to the beat and to samples as well, that I'm quite happy just using those, to be honest. You know, I don't feel too disappointed that I don't get to use everything on this device, but again, you know, I've paid quite a lot of money for this device. You could be sitting there thinking, wow, you're only using a third of the device there, which is true, but I don't know, I feel kind of happy that I only really get to use these three. Maybe on some rare occasions I'll be able to use these. And, you know, I've got this device, you know, maybe my taste will change over time. This is still here. I might end up liking more of a rough sound, and then I can make more use of these circuits later on down the line, who knows. So I think that is important to stress, that if you're someone that likes a clean mix, if you're someone that's making lo-fi beats and lo-fi hip-hop, you might not be able to get the maximum out of this device. You might be stuck on these few circuits. And again, another area of it, I mean, I don't really use the LFOs either. I don't think that's something that's really used that much in hip-hop. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong in the comments below. Me personally, I don't tend to use that side of the device either. So you could be screaming at the monitor now saying I've wasted my money, but we are where we are with this, and I still like what I can do with it. So that aside, that kind of sort of caution around buying this device and spending a lot of money on it, what I do want to say about it is what it does do for me, it does extremely well. So this clean boost circuit, the saturation and the enhancement circuits, combined with the equalizers, combined with the filters and the three independent controls down here, you can transform the sound of your beat. You can take a bad sounding beat and make it sound incredible. So that's really important to note, that that's what the money is getting you, in my opinion. You're getting really, really good sound quality from these. And one thing that's interesting to note as well is that each of these circuits, when you change between them, the EQ is tailored to each one individually. So you'll get a slightly different response out of these two dials when you change circuit, and it's just great because you can spend loads of time fiddling around and just finding these sweet spots with the high and the low and the circuit that you're using. Hours of fun really, and yeah, that particular combination of things going on, it really does seem to add a sort of extra energy to your music. So that's another thing that I think it has really got going for it. It doesn't do an awful lot. It does even less for me because of my taste, but those things that it does do, it does them so well. We're getting sort of towards a conclusion now. One last thing that I wanted to mention is kind of, who is this device for, who's it good for, and who would I recommend buy this device and be able to say it was expensive but it was worth it? Well, it really does depend on your individual tastes and how much you like spending on gear. I personally think it's just about been worth it. Now, I say that because obviously I can't use some of the device, so that's a big sort of negative. But like I've already mentioned, the build quality and the sound of what it does, incredible. So if you are a lo-fi beat maker like me, or a hip-hop producer, and you just want that little bit of spice, that little bit of sauce on top, I think you're really going to enjoy this device. If you like having more distorted and sort of muddier sounding and crunchier sounding beats, I think you're going to love this. So these extra circuits around here, you'll be able to make the most of those on either individual samples or full beats, and I think you'll have a lot of fun running things through it and putting them through those really crunchy distortion circuits over here on the right. I think finally, and this is very important as well, is that if you're someone that really likes being hands-on with your gear and you don't particularly like using digital audio workstations and digital interfaces, you're going to have an absolute blast with this. That's one of my favourite things about it. It's like a mixing box and it's really hands-on. So obviously, you have to use your hands to use it. It is literally hands-on. But it's really nice being hands-on with your music and listening to the effect that it does when you change a dial and then maybe dialing it back and then trying something else, trying a different circuit, playing with the filters. It really is fully hands-on with your music, and that's probably the main thing that I like about it. No computer required, it just sits at the end of your chain and you can play around for as long as you want. You could lose hours on this thing just trying to tweak the sound and make it sound perfect. So that's one of the big selling points. If you're someone that feels like that would be nice, you definitely won't be disappointed with this, combined with the overall premium feel of it. So conclusion wise, I think there's obviously some really strong selling points for this device. There's obviously a few things which kind of let it down in the way that I'm using it. So overall, would I say that this was worth £400, £450, that sort of area, for a device that essentially adds a bit of clean boost and does a bit of EQ and filtering? It's a really, really close call. I think the build quality and the sound of the effects really does want to sway me, but the fact that I'm only kind of using probably a third of the device in total, that's obviously quite a big chunk of what you're paying for, and I'm not really using it that much in my beats. So it's an expensive luxury item to have, I think. I think it's one of those devices that if you never own one and you never touch one, you'll never be bothered about owning one and think you'll just dismiss it and think it's too expensive, I don't want to own that, I don't need to. That's absolutely understandable. But if you do get to use one and you do get to experience what it can do, you can't let it go. That's just it. You're in. You have to use it on everything. You have to use it on all your samples, all your beats. It ends up having to go through this at some point. So I don't even know if that actually helps. So I hope those points are useful, guys. It's quite hard to ramble on about things like this and make it structured, make it interesting and make it useful. So I hope the points that I've spoken about are useful. If you've got any further questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below and I'll do my best to answer them. As I said, if you want to hear this in action, check out the rest of my playlist and you can see me running some things through it. Don't forget to check out all my other links below as well, my shop and the ways that you can help support me doing what I do here. I will be back with more videos very soon.